Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Revenue Hacks with myself, Khristina, the rest of the team here. Just a reminder for everyone that this week we are giving away another mug, so you too can have one of these with your face on it like this. I'm absolutely embarrassed to show mine all the time, so you can be part of the No Nonsense crew. It is for the person who is very much involved in the conversation, so keep tagging, keep messaging, don't be afraid to ask questions. We have a superstar on today who's going to talk about acquisitions, and he comes from Susanne's company, which is very, very cool. Very excited about this. And also remember, we are on the hunt for new hosts, which is going to be super. We are expanding our team and we are looking for hosts. So we've been sharing all week on LinkedIn and on social media. So please feel free to tag yourself in, tag people that you think are welcome or that we should welcome into our team. And we'll get to it over the next few weeks because we are very, very keen to roll out some fresh faces. Before we go into today's show, we're just going to go quick around the room just to say hello to everyone. So B.
Hey, B. So I'm the founder of My.O.C. It's a consulting companies helping hotels overall achieving better revenue.
Susanne.
I'm Susanne Williams. I'm the Commercial Director at Journey. We are a tech and marketing agency in Cheltenham.
Kane. I'm Kane.
I'm Kane Wheatley, Acquisition Director at Journey in Cheltenham. Work with Susanne.
Great. So I'm going to pass everything over to Susanne because Susanne and Kane are going to kick off today. And let's get to it.
Yes, so we've talked so much about stopping the silos in revenue management. And last week we talked about personal branding as a masterclass. So as January is Masterclass month and we're here to learn, I thought I would bring in Kane, who we work so closely together. We're partners in crime for our hotels across the world, to talk about paid acquisition, what it means, what it looks like, how it affects revenue, how you can track and measure it. So we're going to kick off with Kane doing, putting up some talking points, but do put your comments in, let us know what you think, what your thoughts are, and any questions that you have. Today's really about an introduction to expanding and broadening your knowledge and some signposting in terms of how you learn more. So let's kick off. The first, I'm going to start with a question, and it's for everyone watching and for the panel, and it's about how you track and measure your direct channel first and foremost before we hand over to Kane. So how do you track and measure your direct channel?
I love the way we're all quiet. I knew you were going to say that. First of all, we've got a lot of different analytical reports in the background that I use. So obviously we use Google Analytics, and I also use any social media channel analytical data that we have available. I use the Book Now button on all social media so that people can actually directly link to my website, which I get better conversion, and also I get more information from Google compared to what I would get from Facebook, because again, Facebook is kind of vague with some of the information that they give you. So I'd always then look into my analytical kind of data, and I'd kind of analyze that maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, depending on how things are, because we do have a number of properties that would be directly linked to that. But in the likes of brands, then I need to request that from certain brands if I don't actually have access to it. And that's one of the things I have to say, being part of a chain can bring down, is the fact that you don't have all this fresh analytical data to your hand. You have to request it. And a request can take anything from 48 hours to what we're seeing at the moment because of COVID times and people being on furlough, a week to 2 weeks.
Yeah, jumping on that, for me, it's also about like down to the very granular level, trying to, whenever we build a system in independent properties mainly, it's to make sure that all the rate plans, the sources, everything is very, very much detailed. And that's super helpful because you don't have to go into many different systems. You have the information in your PMS and the information that is coming from your channel manager telling you that this is a meta, this is coming from your Facebook, this is coming from your own website, etc. This is coming from mobile. So depending on the systems you use, but some systems allow you to have quite a lot of details. And for me, that's just much easier than anything else. I know some people really love to have very limited amount of rate plans. I don't care. I prefer to have that because at least I have all the information in the same place. Then next to it, I think the great place where you can look at your data is really on Google Analytics, and you get everything. So if your mapping and your tags are done properly, then you get all the information in there of whatever is falling here from your website.
Yeah, I think your point B there about the PMS and making sure that that's, I mean, we've said it over and over again, haven't we? And I know that you can't track what Kane, we know that we can't track all the way through your tag manager right into the PMS. But I think when you're forecasting source and you're looking quite closely at what's happening digitally, that, you know, you can gauge if you're quite detailed in your segmentation and your source forecasting. You know, you're not going to be a massive leap away from being relatively accurate with what information is coming through your sources that doesn't necessarily hit your PMS. Yep. So all about your PMS as always. Okay, so Kane, you've got some talking points that we're going to start off with as an introduction to acquisition, starting off with what it actually is. I mean, we could say digital marketing, but it's really not, is it?
No, because I think, I mean, the way we sort of changed the naming convention to acquisition is purely because it fits to this industry so well in terms of acquiring guests. That's what we're trying to do all the time in terms of driving traffic to the website. So, I mean, first and foremost, acquisition, that's what it is. It's just another word for digital marketing, which is tailored to this hospitality space. So essentially what we would do is drive traffic to said website through paid media and organic search. Obviously paid media being the largest part of that, purely down to where we are currently in the space in terms of trying to sort of combat online travel agents and other sources. But I think the second point on here fits in quite well to what we just started talking about, which was the simplification of everything. So tracking is imperative. I mean, we spoke about it before, haven't we, Susanne, at length around, from a revenue manager's point of view, if everything's not tracked to as much as it possibly can be, as it's going in, the actual output of what you're trying to analyze through Google Analytics or whatnot is going to be distorted. And then the further that gets distorted down the line, when you finally come to analyze things, you sort of, there's more guesswork as opposed to actually fact. So I think that's again, that's just massive. And it's good that we started with that actually, because it's just probably one of the most important things, isn't it?
Well, I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is it's what we in a revenue field already know, but it's rare that you get acquisition or digital marketing that fits so closely in our sphere of tracking and data and measurement. So I know we obviously work really closely together, and that's why I thought it'd be useful for you to come on today, is to show that it can be done, that when you've got revenue and digital working so closely together, you can really make a massive impact. So I guess sharing your knowledge today is going to be quite beneficial for everyone watching. But for people that are watching, do jump in with questions, because Kane's here to answer them in his imitable way.
Well, I think that's the thing. That's the thing, isn't it? From where we've got to the point we have is from challenging each other in terms of coming from different angles. So from a revenue management point of view, and also from a digital marketing point of view. And the amount of times between us, we'd ask each other, going, "Well, why not? Why can't you do that?" And there normally is a way. It's just that people aren't necessarily challenging that as much to actually get what they need out of their marketing, really. So I suppose
when you're saying, sorry, before you go on, Kane, but just like looking at it, you know, simplification is great, and we've spoken about this for a very, very long time. But we all know that there's certain PMSs where you don't actually, and different parts of the world are the same, where a rate code, just say OTA B&B, covers everyone. Every channel, you know, and for them to actually consider changing it is a bit of a drama, even though now there's no real point that people actually should do. I think people should actually really invest in their PMS right now and make all the modifications, because no one has a lot of business on the books for the future, you know, and separate out all these different rate codes. It doesn't create, you know, a big, huge brand. But would you recommend to people to actually segregate out the rate codes and just say OTA BK for booking.com, OTA for Expedia, so that everyone's able to track everything properly? Because again, like if you look at certain PMSs, you can tag the rate code to that particular company or agent, and it can come back in.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's definitely sort of track it as much as you can, over tag everything, be as granular as you possibly can be, because when you come back to retargeting or looking at that audience and how they've interacted with an ad or how they're performing on your site, the more information you're going to get, the more chance you get in the future of drilling down and making a better impact than you did at the start.
Just Danielle is just asking, are we talking about direct bookings acquisition or through OTAs? We are talking about direct.
Yes.
And the multi channels that direct actually is. So no, it's not through OTAs, it's about competing with your OTA channels to reduce the cost of acquisition. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so then we're on to education, Kane.
Sure, and I suppose that's a good question, because it sort of ties in with that really, in terms of how we communicate the transparency, the clarity of what we do. And as Susanne said, it's all about direct bookings and how we can impact and drive those for our hotels. So I think that's key. I think there's a lot of terminology, probably in the revenue management space and also the digital marketing space, that sometimes gets a bit all over the place in terms of people not being consistent with how they talk about different things. So I think that's going to be the main thing, is the education piece. And what I mean by that is, from our side, I could sit here and talk about jargon and waffle on about all sorts, but I think that doesn't really help your client, your partner, the hotelier, the revenue manager. And again, it's going back to that simplification point of view, which is, here's what we can do. Here's where we can drive the traffic from. Here's the data, the information we need, and then people can work together and be far more aligned to actually get the results that they want to. And I think from what I say there about the sharing of education shouldn't weaken you, and I think that's a key thing that I found in the past with digital marketing, and obviously now as we're known acquisition, which is, it isn't the dark arts which people think it is. Probably the same with revenue management.
That is. Revenue management is the dark art.
Yeah.
So how can we voice it as a revenue manager? Like, let's say each revenue manager is analyzing the data and knows when are the needed periods, for example, the weak, the low periods. So how do we work together for acquisition to really target either some specific markets, because that's something that you've highlighted that maybe there's an opportunity, or for us to say, like, look, I need to attract more people on weekends, for example. How do we get the business from acquisition? How do we work together on that?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, the information that you need from a digital marketing point of view would be coming from the revenue manager straight away. So it would be, what are the lead times at the moment? So you sort of get an average sort of lead time as to how far out people book. With that in mind, you can then begin to target those people to try and fill those gaps. But it's a good question, because if someone said, right, well, I need to fill this room 2.5 weeks on Wednesday, it's quite impossible to be that granular. But what you can do is, roughly with a lead time, try and push people down that way. And again, if you go to specific days and dates, you can obviously do that with tailored imagery and tailored copy, but then you go down the route of being too granular and focusing on that one day as opposed to a period.
Can I just jump in there on that? Because if you are looking to fill specific gaps, I think one of the things that I always look at, and digital are a channel to help achieve that, but it's about the multiple channels. It's about what you know about your audience that sits in your PMS data. So if you know that, last year or the year before, you had a group of guests that responded within that lead time at that price point, I would probably include some email marketing that went out to them, retarget it, as well as doing a Facebook retargeting and the digital, so that I'm covering all bases and spreading the budget that I've got in order to achieve that shortening of the gap. So I think that if you get that right, and the storytelling and the message goes correctly along with it, I think you're enhancing your brand at the same time. I think segmenting your audience, we've talked about that, it all fits in so closely together, but segmenting that audience to really know who's going to book for those last minute stays is quite an important priority for me. And then at least you can help support the digital marketing and the acquisition in order to achieve. And because it's so specific, you're then tracking to see what happens actually on the books.
Yeah, I guess there's a question, like a comment from Charlie saying, like, how do we know? Sorry, let me just have a look. He says a lot of people just run ads continuously. How much human intelligence is needed to maximize revenue and results? And that's kind of linked to what I was asking, is like, how do we make sure that we're not wasting money by putting some ads for that are going to have an impact on periods that it's not needed? And linked to that, there's very often the comments from general managers or top management team saying, like, well, why would I pay for ads on my own brand, for example? Is it really valuable? So it's kind of blurry, I think, like how much can we control these ads?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think first and foremost, again, it's that two-way communication between revenue managers and digital marketers to actually to understand what's working, when the bookings are being made, when they're staying, and stuff like that. So that's the first. You need to be constantly on top of where those bookings are. There's no point sort of looking at it 2-3 months at a time and then going back to a digital marketer, whether that be freelancer, agency, whatever, and discussing it. It needs to be a continual thing. And then to Charlie's point about that human intelligence is, I mean, we'll touch on it again later around sort of automation coming in, and automation is definitely needed 100%, but there's still that human intelligence needed to actually make those optimizations specifically for a hotel, because at the end of the day, a robot isn't going to have the ability to talk to a revenue manager and go, well, what's going on next week? They need to have an understanding of what's going on.
I think as well, Daniela brought up a really good point as well. It is about having a good website and a good SEO strategy involved, because you can't go and expect the customer, to buy into certain things when they go onto your website and your landing page is horrible. And then it takes forever to get to the point where they want it. I'm in the middle of actually rebuilding some of our websites because we just want it to be a case of one scroll, that's it. Because when you're looking at it, the majority of business is now done on mobile. So if your website isn't mobile optimized, you're already losing the customer right away, because your pictures are either too big or it's 10 scrolls as if they're on Twitter or WhatsApp or whatever in a group chat. You lose them when there's too much text. So what we're doing at the moment in JMK is we're making everything very simple, very clean, very just, that's it. What you see is pretty much the same thing you'll see on a screen on a desktop, just maybe a little bit extra information. However, that kind of touch with the customer is a lot better, because we've seen a lot of websites over the last while. You can change them online, but they're never optimized for web. There's something just wrong with the back ends of a lot of companies at the moment, where they've just not tagging it that once a change is done, it has to be done. You have to email them. You have to constantly be on top of them. And I always look at it from the point of view of everyone has a tablet, everyone has a mobile now, and your tablets are tracked as a mobile. So why not just optimize everything for that particular set of customers? Simple as. And you need to have a good strategy, because you don't want to be burning through money on something that's not going to bring you any type of return on investment, which we've all seen. It's kind of part of the learning curve when it comes to SEO and, to PPC, paying for everything. But at the end of the day, you just want to learn from your mistakes, and you just don't want to plow so much money into it, because this can be a costly thing as well. Let's be honest, marketing can be very, very costly if you're doing it completely incorrect.
We think from our point of view, whereby we work with Journey, we will sort of be quite insistent on a potential client and partner having a website rebuilt as well, because you can have the best agency in the world doing the best ads in the world. Like you said, Khristina, if you send it to an average website, or even worse, an average booking engine, there and then you're not going to drive the bookings. It's as simple as that. So all of that money that could be seen as wasted is going to definitely be seen as wasted, because you're not going to get hardly any conversions, as opposed to having something that's truly optimized, especially on mobile, they say.
I just want to pick up on the point about the 1 or 2 clicks on mobile. I think that is relevant to the majority of properties. But if you are a resort in the Maldives or in Antigua, or if you're a luxury property with a high ticket value, how the 2-click booking is not necessarily as relevant, because it's about the full guest experience. So
I think that should be done in video form. That's just me, you're when you go on, it should be videos, and it should be, like a basket that you're actually connecting everything. So, one web page, you've got that whole experience where you're walking through, you're getting into the water, and then it's got the spa. So you can click on that spa menu and do it, but it should all be as you're going by. These are the type of products that's in this particular video. Do you want this? Yes. Like a shopping basket. If you look at the ingredients, if you look at like BBC, you can actually click on order all these things from Tesco, and they come direct to your door when you're looking at food recipes. We should be able to do the same thing when we're making a booking on a hotel.
Yeah, I guess the main point is the two-click thing is really like on every single page, you need to have the call to action, the book now button. That's the main thing. It's that very often this is lost in translation, and there's maybe on page 1 or page on the room where there is that. But even if you have a video of your resort in the Maldives or wherever, I want to go on holidays, by the way. Like on every single page, there should be something that hint people to make the booking. I think that's quite key.
Absolutely. And just sorry, Susanne, just on that, I think that was the great point, because you think from a mobile point of view as well, if that person is going to make said booking on a mobile and there isn't a call to action, likely they're probably at that stage of wanting to buy, and you haven't put it in their face as obvious as you could do. And sometimes that's an opportunity that's missed as well, is that we forget that in the buying cycle, there is an end point where you want someone to book. It's not all about just, okay, getting to the next point, getting to the next point. Otherwise you end up in a continual loop, as opposed to actually getting someone to do something on that website, which is purchase a room night or a break or a holiday.
Just to pick up on Charlie's point, and before you go into your showing us how it's all done, Kane, I think with acquisition and with the heads down, bums up in data, like we all are on a daily basis, the creativity and the storytelling and the web and the content and everything that goes along with that is actually the most engaging part, isn't it? And when that's right, your job is a lot easier, would you say?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's the whole, just from the start, the word of acquisition is you expect everything else to be in place. So the website's there, the booking engine's there. Our job is then to acquire the guests and get them to convert. If any of those things are a problem, then we shouldn't be probably trying to acquire that guest yet, because you need to fix those two things first. So as long as you've got, like Charlie said, an emotionally connecting sort of website, and more importantly, the booking engine's got to be seamless. It's got to be quick. You can't be hanging around going, oh, I might book this later, because that guest might go to another competitor. So those are the two things. Once those are in place, acquisition should be easy. Touch wood.
Well, that's it. We're done.
It should be.
So do you want to go through your kind of what it looks like and what the metrics are?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of platforms, obviously, analytics isn't on here because that's more of an analysis platform, which you get all the data from using these platforms. But there are going to be lots and lots of platforms and lots of like shiny new ones that people will potentially throw in your face to go, oh, use Snapchat ads, use TikTok. It's until there comes a point where everyone starts to use TikTok to book their hotel rooms, then there isn't any point. If you've got these 4 platforms here,
I can see us dancing to book the book now button. No, sorry.
Exactly. No, it's you've got your meta search platform. So as we've seen, the key ones, if you look on like the Google right hand side where you search for a brand, you've got the price comparisons. Also on TripAdvisor. So those are the two key areas that you can push rates out to on meta search platforms and locations. So we can touch on those in more detail as well, but I'll just run through them all first. And Google Ads obviously being a primary one for us, because it's what drives the most traffic, the most quality traffic. You've got so much potential within Google Ads. People will straight away think, oh, it's just a search ad, so a text ad on a Google search results page. You can do far more things than that. You've got the Google Search Network, which is everything that's text related, text ads that you see when you search. But you've also got the display network where you can send out visual ads and place them on different websites. You've got you can do YouTube ads within Google. There's so much possibility, and sometimes a lot of people won't sort of scratch the surface with what you can achieve. But saying that, even with text ads, again, there's variations. There's different ways you can optimize, different ways you can time them to be shown on a particular day or time of the day. So there's so much potential in Google. That should be the main sort of area to spend your money initially, I'd probably say. And then Facebook Business Manager, so you can run Facebook and Instagram ads from within there. And again, the platform's quite sophisticated now in terms of you can do A/B testing within the platform. There's a level of automation within there, and also the actual platform itself is quite intuitive. So you can actually, if you're a complete novice, want to try something on Facebook, you could have a go. But I suppose the next level up from that is the human intelligence, all the data, all the experience that you get from someone who knows what they're doing around seeing the results and compare and improve stuff in the future. And then little old Bing at the end. Poor Bing ads. I don't know what people will think about Bing, but I mean, it's a small space. we sort of tend to go by, in terms of traffic split from where people come from Google, from Bing, whatever, it's probably around 5% of total traffic. But again, if you're a massive hotel in America and 5% is still a large proportion, then it makes sense to run Bing ads as well, because you're just going to sweep up any sort of easy conversions which you might have lost to an OTA or travel agent, or even a rival business that is sort of bidding on your name to try and get business to their property. So it's a mix of those four, really. They're the bread and butter. Those are the platforms we should be using on a day-to-day basis. If you've got limited budget, you start with these four. If you've got loads of budget, you still need these four. And then you can start to look elsewhere once you're really successful within these four. But people generally don't seem to optimize or get the most out of these four platforms as a base.
So
Daniela,
sorry.
Oh, go on. Daniela just had a quick question. She was saying, obviously, she's a complete novice to this. So what would you recommend to her to be running ads? Would you say Google and Facebook, or would you say Google, Facebook, and meta search?
Again, it would be purely dependent on the goals. So what you're looking to achieve. So once you've got that, so for example, if it was completely direct business, you would say potentially, or run some branded ads, because in the short term, you'll take traffic away from OTAs and you'll be paying a fraction of what you would to them. But equally, meta search could do that as well, because if the revenue managers have got the rates and everything in order, then if you're slightly cheaper or have rate parity with OTAs, and the official website is an easy way of converting, then that's also a good way of doing it. And then coming down to Facebook, again, if it's more initially, I know we want to touch on sort of, is Facebook and Instagram a conversion platform? It definitely is, but primarily it's about brand awareness, getting your resort out there, potentially pushing sort of offers and packages, because that's what we see on a day-to-day basis. That's what, you know, the stream's for, is to sort of get someone to book. As we know, it's not 9 times out of 10, it's not there and then on that initial scroll, but it's definitely going to have a massive impact in that overall piece. So again, it would just be dependent on your goals, and then you could go from there.
And so if we were to, let's say, be perfect and be on all the platforms, would you have a rough idea of how much business does it drive on average in hotels? Just to for us to visualize, like, how much revenue am I missing out? How much is coming from meta search currently? Is it 6% of the business for hotels that are on meta search? Is it more? Is it less?
Yeah, I mean, we can drill down to that level. I think first and foremost, the question should be how much of your business is direct business, and then also how much of that business is online business. And once you get to that point, then you can drill down into the various channels. But Susanne, do you want to jump in on that? I thought you just.
I was just going to. It's the same. I think that depending on what the hotel want to share with you, you know, if we're not doing revenue for a hotel and Kane's looking after their acquisition, so not every client will share, you know, what their full business mix is. So Kane's given, you know, I want this return on investment, and then we'll talk, well, what is the distribution landscape? What's coming through the GDS? You know, what's coming through the various different channels? How can we manage it? What's the measurement? So we have this conversation on an almost daily basis for hotels that we don't have access to everything. Yeah. And I guess for anybody watching, I would say that if you are working with a digital marketing agency, share that information with them, because you'll get far, far better results. Work in partnership, you know, they're here to support and drive your business, and it can be really powerful when you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and typically, I mean, I was giving you this number because this is what I've seen, that, meta search was doing like around 6% in one property, and it's always like, is it good? Is it not good? Mm-hmm. And for me, I thought like, well, and Sylvia, I don't agree with you then, because I think that's quite important, meta search. I think that's an easy way to get some business and some visibility, etc. So I'd say like, well, you don't spend a lot by doing it. This is pretty easy to set up, and this is a good return. So it's more like, okay, if we have to prioritize some of them, which one would we go first, basically? But understand that, people need to share that for you to know.
I think as well, like, for instance, we've got a few different properties across the UK and we've got some properties in kind of like rural Ireland outside of the capital cities, and we actually would spend some money a good decent part of money on Facebook ads, because the Facebook actually does generate quite a lot for us. Like, for instance, there was a big event recently. We were in a tiered lockdown, so only people within that certain area could actually travel to the venue. Again, it had to be all, you know, social distance, whatever, but we actually sold out 2 weeks in advance all our F&B tables for this particular thing, you know, because people wanted to be able to be in a venue, to be able to watch it on a big screen, have dinner, have food, and it worked really, really well for our overall total revenue. And when you look at it from that way, it's a great way, Facebook especially, to reach the local clientele that you want to bring back to your property. Your property may not be known for food and beverage, but, you know, it's a great way of reaching out and kind of making it known that you do these things. And that helps your bottom line. And Facebook ads aren't actually expensive to run. Like, I think we spent a £5 on our one, and that was it, £5. Simple. And that was it, done. We were full and we made a killing, and it was amazing. So, you know, it does have them positive turnarounds compared to what some people kind of will say, well, I don't want to advertise on Facebook. I can't see why you wouldn't want to do it. 100%.
You can test. I mean, you always need to test anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to work, but
yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of, it's like you said, Khristina, if you know your audience that well, it can be so targeted that people think straight away, well, if you do a Facebook ad, that means everyone on Facebook's going to see your ad. They're not. It can be as targeted as you want it to be. Obviously, if they like it, it might appear on someone else's and stuff like that, someone else's feed. But if it's local targeting around F&B and stuff like that, you want to drive some table bookings for a said period, like you said, you can spend a £5 and you can get really good results.
I love how Kat just commented there, because Kat is actually joining us over the next few weeks as well. But she mentioned weddings. We did touch on Facebook and weddings with Kelly Mortimer in one of our episodes last year, and it was amazing to see that you can get so granular and so in depth, even to look into people who are changing their relationship status. That just blew me away. So, you know, it's things like that you're able to use as well to kind of get them people and target them people. And that's what's really cool in a voyeurism way, that you're tracking people like that. But it is really, really cool. We just had a question there about Facebook and Facebook Pixel and Google. Do we have anything on that? Can you kind of share what that is? If you
so I mean, Facebook Pixel point of view, it just gives you another level of tracking. So again, we're saying about the importance of tracking. If you haven't got Facebook Pixel set up, and in our work, you've got a website and a booking engine, you're trying to link the two. If you haven't got the Facebook Pixel, which would potentially sit into Google Tag Manager or something like that, which will link the two platforms, you're potentially going to lose the effect or lose that booking or when that conversion took place. So again, if you don't have a Facebook Pixel set up, you can spend all the money in the world, but you might not necessarily know how it's truly doing. Again, it's just that next level of tracking. It's similar to Google. If you set up a Google ad and didn't have a Google Ads conversion code or anything on your website or booking engine, you're not going to know how it's done. So it's really, really important to get those two things set up.
Very cool. Great. So will we go on to your setup and your variations?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Cool. So I mean, it's a good point, because like you said about the voyeurism of Facebook, I think that's the key now. About so how can you target people? You know, a lot of people might think it's a magic wand and Facebook has all the insights. Facebook, you can target people based on a few things. The three things which I've got in that tiny screenshot, which I'll talk through, are demographics of a person, interests and behaviors. Those are the three things. So if you've got someone who's in a certain location, that's liked a certain page and is interested in holidays to Ireland, well, you can target them pretty easily. But again, it's all dependent on their behavior and their interest on Facebook. If they haven't liked something, if they haven't interacted with something, if they've not shared the information about themselves, you're not going to know it. So again, it just depends on how, and again, that potentially with the whole sort of the way cookies are going, the cookie policies and the privacy that people may have may become a little bit harder in the future. But you're still going to have enough data, enough people to target to based on how they've interacted on social platforms. So just to start on this would be sort of, if you were setting up an ad, starting an ad, you chose your platform, or you're thinking about which platform to choose. the thing we always say, and it's so important, and again, we sort of touched on it already, which is the purpose of an ad. Why are you doing it? If you just say, right, well, I need to spend some money on Facebook, but why? What are you looking to achieve from it? Like you said, Khristina, that's a good example of if you've got a £5 and you're looking to sell event tickets or table bookings in a certain area, that's going to be really easy. You'd like to think to track and measure that. But if you haven't got that purpose at the start to identify what you're trying to achieve, everything underneath in terms of my bullet points is probably a waste of time, because if you haven't got that, the purpose, then who do you know to target? And then when you come to the creative fun stuff, if you're briefing in a team or a designer or a content team or anything like that, how do they know to tailor their messaging or imagery based on the targeting? So you can see there's a few steps you need to do. And again, setting up the ad either in Google or in Facebook, why the two platforms are so good is because they make it quite intuitive for people to actually, they almost force you down that route at the start. So Google, as an example, if you want to create a new campaign in Google, straight away it says, what's your goal? And it gives you a few options, and then it sort of points you down a path of, well, this campaign will be suited for that goal. But again, it's just so important that you've got those things to start with. Once you've got those, so if you've got the purpose, right, we're targeting this, we need to do this, you can then start to go down that route of targeting people. Now, if I went on there and said, right, everyone between 18 and 65 in the UK, it's going to be really, really high. So the results then accordingly might be not as good as you hoped for. On the flip side of that, you could then say, right, 25 to 30-year-olds in London that like X, Y, Z, and then it could actually be like 10 people. So what Facebook will do will give you a projected reach of how many people you're going to actually might view that ad. So that will give you sort of an indication in terms of, one, how much spend you're going to need, and two, how successful that ad could be. So they do try and help you out in that regard in terms of projecting what you might achieve with set budget.
Would you think that it's a preconceived idea that Facebook is more like for very targeted things than Google, for example? Or
yeah, it's a good point. That I mean, I come at it from two different angles. On one side, if it's Google search, I don't think necessarily you can beat that because someone's actually typed in that specific phrase. So they've got that intent. It's quite easy. Google display is another sort of question, which is, how targeted is that compared to Facebook? Facebook's definitely way more targeted in terms of what you can do. I mean, we have these conversations in-house. There's actually someone in my team who actually questions display ads all the time, but I think he's come around now to the fact that you can actually target people quite well within the Google platform, but Facebook still, you can just be as granular as you like based on what they've actually interacted with on that platform. So, I mean, moving on to after sort of copy and imagery. So you've set your ad up. I think, again, like we said about the website, the landing page is so important. So you get everything right. You tick the boxes, you got your purpose, you've got your targeting, you got your copy, imagery, everything's done. And then the landing page is dreadful, hasn't got a call to action, doesn't work on mobile. And then all of a sudden, all of that work, everything's done beforehand, is just, almost a waste of time. And again, if you're trying to look at actually how much money you could potentially spend on setting up an ad, again, it's just so important that when you send them to that said landing page, and I know we talked about mobile a little bit around, okay, so if someone's landed on the mobile landing page, it's got to be optimized for someone to potentially convert, and that's got to have a clear call to action on there. And then the last two bits, which was around A/B testing and automation, and these are the things you can do within the platform. So within Facebook, within Google, you can have split testing, you can have various ads running at the same time. The automation will then come in by Google, for example, will then rotate the ad dependent on how well it's performing. So it will do that legwork for you. If an ad is reaching more people and it's getting more interaction, it will then serve that ad more than the ones that aren't necessarily working as well. So that's where automation comes in. But again, you need that sort of human intelligence of what you're trying to achieve first to be able to get to that stage.
Fab.
I think it's just things. I'm not even opening my mouth because this is everything we've spoken about over the last while. You know, we have had 9 months of us giving out about websites and imagery just constantly in content. Daniela just asked about doing a wedding acquisition one. Daniela, just check back because we did do that show with Kelly Mortimer, who actually did cover wedding acquisitions and advertisements and everything. And if you don't see what you need there, feel free to reach out to Kelly. Feel free to reach out to us because we're more than happy to get someone on to expand on a lot more things as well. Sorry, go on, Kane.
No, that's okay. No, I was going to say if there's any sort of questions that we wanted to cover off before we go to the next slide.
No, I think you're safe for now.
Cool. Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, this one is hopefully more of a discussion point. So hopefully it should sort of provoke a few things. But I think the key thing, this is going back to basics, again, going from a website first. So if we're talking about landing page, or we're talking about the website that you're sending said traffic to, it's measuring the impact of that. So the few bullet points I've got down here is, first and foremost, SEO is not a choice. Some people like to think it is, it's not. And secondly, mobile first is also not a choice. And you could throw site speed in there. Google site speed tests and other things that you can do to test the speed of your website. If it's really slow, on one hand, Google aren't going to be impressed with it in terms of, well, why should we put this website forward to our users if it's going to be really slow? And then secondly, from a user point of view, I mean, we're all so impatient now. If you land on a website and it takes a few seconds to load, you're probably going to just click off it or think it's broken. So those things straight away, again, you can see there's so many different things that need to be in place to get something right. And to touch on SEO again is, you know, I always go down the route of everything's SEO. Like if you break it down, what it actually stands for is search engine optimization. So you're just optimizing a website to appear on a search engine. So in its purest form, everything you do should be, unfortunately, to the mercy of Google, because they pretty much control what you do and where your website goes. So if you meet all their guidelines and do all the things that they say in terms of ticking the box around site speed, a mobile first approach, doing all the SEO techniques in terms of page titles, tagging, all those things, if they're in place, you're going to give your website the best possible chance to appear in search engines. And going on to how that links into acquisition and paid media is sometimes, in terms of a measurement within Google, you have a thing called a quality score, which is how Google rates your ad and how actually good they think your ad is. And if you've got a good landing page experience, if the website's quick and it's SEO friendly and all these things, you can actually end up spending less money and reaching more people because the cost per click will actually be lower. So when people say, well, I haven't got more budget, we can do that work to optimize these things that you can spread that budget a bit further. So again, you can just see there's a few little things, few little tweaks all the time, which you can actually do to make that go a little bit further in what you're trying to achieve.
I think it's a really important point, actually, isn't it? It's about quantity of traffic and how you, rather than just quality, just make sure that it's refined and you're refining and your SEO is good and the whole experience is just all about optimizing your business.
I think it's important as well for people to realize that now, even though you're in a pandemic, you shouldn't stop some sort of marketing spend, whether it's Facebook ads or it's Google ads or it's whatever. I know that there's been some properties that have stopped a lot of this, but they have invested heavily on the social side. So they are continuing the spend. And I think the more you do that and you keep yourself relevant in the market, the more beneficial it will be to you once everything returns. I know we've touched on this so many times, but again, this week I've been speaking to some people who are in between whether they'll spend X or spend Y. And I can definitely recommend that you continue with some sort of marketing, some sort of relevant marketing to keep you in that space, even if you are shut down because you can't have gas at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's one of those. It's like with anything. If you stop it now, it's going to be harder to pick up things, get things going again. Once this, the demand starts to come back more than it currently is at and stuff like that. So yeah, if you can carry on, and like you say, it's a must in our eyes, really. Before
we finish up, do you want to blitz through this? Because I know we're running short on time.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the last point, probably the most the most important one really, which was, what do digital marketers and revenue managers have to do better? We have to be willing to share information with each other, talk to each other, communicate more, and it should be a winning relationship really. That's what we see, and I think that's the way forward. And then the two above that really is you can enable that relationship by not talking in jargon and waffle, both sides. I think we're both guilty of it as in terms of people speaking in that way, and then measuring success. That again is key. It's information from both sides. Like with Susanne, for example, if I withheld everything from her and she did with me, then there's not really any point, is there? It's got to be both ways, and then it should be a good sort of thing to happen.
Although, Kane, I feel like you did just tail us off a little bit there. There's waffle on both sides.
No, there's humility from our side as well. I mean, it's everyone's guilty of it, and you end up sort of slipping into talking in that way. And I think 9 times out of 10 people aren't necessarily no one likes to say, "Oh, I don't know that. Can you repeat that?" And I think that's just our obligation really, to try and simplify as much as we can, so that everyone's on the same page, and then it's sort of an easier situation for everyone. Brilliant.
I think that was really interesting, and I hope it was useful for people watching, because we didn't want to go down the whole route of micro conversions and all the real technical, and without covering off just the basics to acquisition and what it means and how it fits in, and how closely revenue and digital work together for the maximum impact. So I think we're pretty much out of time now. I think this has been quite a long session, so we'll wrap it up there. Chris, have you got a winner of our Revenue Hacks mug?
I love the way you say Chris Pickett, and B can see it, because I clearly just said to you, someone else. Why me? Why me? I have to say there's been really, really good interaction from a lot of people today, but Daniela, you have won your Revenue Hacks mug, so congratulations. Maria will be in touch with you how to get it out to you, and everyone, if you want to host Revenue Hacks, you want to be part of our team, remember we are on the hunt for new recruits, so we will be looking for someone over the next 2 weeks. We've had a lot of people tagged over the last 2 days, so thank you so much for that and for sharing, everyone. But please feel free to tag a lot more, and we'll be in contact then with the people over the next few days. There's no screen test, don't worry, we're not going to put you through. It's not like you're going for Britain's Got Talent or the X Factor, unless you want to. And then once I get to be Simon, I'm happy. You don't get to be Simon, Susanne, it's me. But don't be afraid to tag whoever. No one's, we're open to everyone, and we will see you guys next week. Kane, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really, really good. If you have questions on acquisitions, please reach out to Susanne, reach out to myself, reach out to B. Don't be afraid to ask. We are on all the social channels. You can catch us up. You can actually see what we do behind the scenes as well on Revenue Hacks, on the Revenue Hacks Instagram, and also our own personal Instagram, where people actually have moans and we talk about industry as well. And you can find us on Twitter. That's where Susanne and I are probably the most active with Julie Grieve. Hey Julie, hope you're well. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone. And we will see you guys same time, same back channel next week. Bye.
Bye.